Well, hello there, amazing people. Here are the answers to the exercise questions that we posted in the previous video. If you're encountering me for the first time, my name is David, an online tutor for high school chemistry kids. So let's go ahead without any further ado and see if we can do justice to these questions on the screen right now. So question number one starts off by saying, this is the equation of the reaction. Okay, so let's go ahead and label that. And then it says how many moles of HCl will be produced from 1 mole of hydrogen H2. So let's go ahead and solve this question. The first thing to do will be to see the steps. So we can see the steps written over here. So the first thing to do will be to convert to moles. Second thing would be to use the mole ratio. And then the third thing would be to convert to what they want, if that is necessary. Okay. So let's go ahead and apply all these steps to both questions in the first section. So first things first, let's write out the elements, or let's convert to number of moles as it was stated in the number of rules. So we have the question that says how many moles of HCl will form from 1 mole of H2. This was already given to us in moles, so there is no need for conversion. Okay, that's step number one already taken for us. Step number two says get the mole ratio. Now, what would the mole ratio be? From the question, it was asked of us how many moles of HCl will form from 1 mole of H2. From the equation, we have H2 plus Cl2 given 2HCl. Okay? How many moles of HCl? This will form from 1 mole of H2. H2 and HCl. From the equation, we can see that H2 produced 2HCl. In other words, 1 mole of hydrogen produce 2 moles of HCl. So therefore, the mole ratio becomes 1:2. That is the mole ratio. Did you see how it was obtained? Now the question says how many moles of HCl form from 1 mole of H2. So now we know that from the equation, 1 mole of H2 or hydrogen produced 2 moles of HCl from the equation. Now the question says, how many moles of HCl will be produced from 1 mole of H2? So therefore, 1 mole of H2 or hydrogen produces an unknown number of moles of HCl. If we cross multiply, therefore we have the number of moles of HCl will be equal to 2 times 1, which is equal to 2 moles. So basically, 2 moles of HCl will be produced from 1 mole of hydrogen. I'm sure you saw how that step was carried out. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward, pretty basic. Question number two says, this is the chemical equation, and it says how many moles of carbon dioxide, CO2, will be formed from 2 moles of carbon monoxide. So the first thing will be to convert into moles, but hopefully that has been done for us, so we need not do that. The next step says to get the mole ratio. Now, what would the mole ratio be? The question itself starts off by saying how many moles of CO2 will form from 2 moles of carbon monoxide, CO. From the equation, we can see that 2CO produced 2CO2. What this means is 2 moles of carbon monoxide produced 2 moles of CO2. So therefore, the mole ratio becomes 2:2, or we can even break it down to its lowest term, 1:1, because when 2 is divided by 2 and the other 2 divided by 2, they become 1 basically. So the question says, how many moles of CO2 be formed from 2 moles of carbon monoxide? So therefore, we complete the statement by saying 2 moles of carbon monoxide produces an unknown number of moles of CO2. So when we cross multiply, we have the number of moles of CO2 multiplied by 2 be equal to 2 times 2. So therefore, when we make this the subject of the formula, we have the number of moles of CO2 produced to be equal to 4, because 2 times 2 over here is 4 divided by 2. So therefore, we have 2 moles of CO2 produced. I'm sure you saw how that was carried out. Pretty simple, pretty basic. Now let's move on to the next category of questions, which is the intermediate section. The intermediate section says, using this chemical equation over here, how many moles of ammonia form or are produced from 6 moles of hydrogen? So the first thing to do would be to convert into moles. Unfortunately, that has been done for us. We have 6 moles of hydrogen over here. The next step to carry out would be to get our mole ratio. What would the mole ratio now be? Well, let's check out the question. The question starts off by saying, how many moles of ammonia, here is ammonia, will form from 6 moles of hydrogen, here is hydrogen. Now, from the equation, we can see that 3H2 produced 2NH3. What does this mean? It means 3 moles of hydrogen produce 2 moles of ammonia. So therefore, the mole ratio becomes 3:2. So now we can go ahead and write down 3 moles of hydrogen produced 2 moles of ammonia. Now, what's the question asking us? How many moles of ammonia form from 6 moles of hydrogen? So therefore, 6 moles of hydrogen produces an unknown number of moles of ammonia or NH3, whichever one you choose. So we can cross multiply from this point. So we have 3 multiplied by the question mark is equal to 6 multiplied by 2. So therefore, making this question mark the subject of the formula, we divide both sides by its coefficient, which in this case is 3. So therefore, this 3 cancels this 3. The number of moles of ammonia produced therefore becomes 6 multiplied by 2, which is 12, divided by 3. That becomes 4 moles of ammonia, NH3, produced. I'm sure you saw how all these steps were carried out. Easy peasy, 4 moles of ammonia produced. Now the next question says, in the same equation, which one is the limiting reactant if we have 1 mole of nitrogen and 2 moles of hydrogen? Well, let's go ahead and check out the steps for getting which is the limiting reactant. The limiting reactant can be found by 3 basic steps. The first is to convert all reactants to moles, and the next is to divide by their coefficients. And then the smallest answer becomes the limiting reagent. So let's take the steps. So all the reactants have been converted to moles already. The next step would be to divide by their coefficient. So for nitrogen, we have 1 mole, as you can see over here. And for hydrogen, we have 2 moles. The next step would be to divide by their coefficient. Now, from the equation, you can see nitrogen, N2 plus 3H2 giving us 2NH3. The coefficient of nitrogen over here is 1. So for nitrogen, it becomes 1 over 1, which is 1. For hydrogen, it becomes the number of moles, which is 2, divided by the coefficient. You can see the coefficient over here, which is 3. 2 divided by 3, that's 0.667. Between 1 and 0.667, which one is smaller? Of course, 0.667 is smaller. So therefore, the limiting reagent or the limiting reactant becomes hydrogen. I'm sure you saw how all these steps were successfully carried out. So we've solved the next set of questions on to the last and the third. The third set of questions starts off by saying, if the theoretical yield of a reaction is 25 and the actual yield is 20, calculate the percentage yield, okay? Now the percentage yield of any reaction is equal to the actual yield divided by the theoretical yield, everything multiplied by 100. The actual yield was given to be 20 grams. So we have 20 divided by the theoretical yield is 25. Everything multiplied by 100. So let's go ahead and plug in our values. 20 divided by 25 gives us 0.8 times 100. That is 80%. This is the percentage yield. So now we have the final question. The final question says, if 4 moles of hydrogen react with excess oxygen, find the mass of water that is formed. So let's go ahead and take the step-by-step procedure that we saw in the similar question in the first section. So the first thing to do would be to convert all the given reactants to number of moles. And that has been done. You can see over here 4 moles of hydrogen. The next step would be to get our mole ratio. From the question, it is said 4 moles of hydrogen react with excess oxygen. Find the mass of water that is produced. So let's go ahead and write out these statements. We know that 2 moles of hydrogen react to produce 2 moles of water, which is 2H2O. 2 moles of hydrogen react to produce 2 moles of water, or H2O, whichever you choose to go with. Now this question, check it out. It says if 4 moles of hydrogen react with excess oxygen, so therefore 4 moles of hydrogen will produce an unknown number of moles of water, H2O. So we cross multiply. When we cross multiply, we have 2 multiplied by the unknown number of moles for water is equal to 4 multiplied by 2. So we just divide both sides by the coefficient of this question mark in order to obtain its value, which in this case is 2. 2 cancels 2 here, and we have this divided by 2. This becomes 8 divided by 2, which is equal to 4 moles of H2O. Now we've obtained our answer in number of moles, which is 4. But the question says, find the mass of water formed. That is easy to do. We have this formula that says number of moles is equal to the mass divided by the molar mass of the substance. Now the number of moles, we found it out to be 4. The mass is what we're looking for. We don't have it. The molar mass of water can be calculated easily, H2O, by adding the individual atomic masses together. Hydrogen is 1 and oxygen is 16. So therefore we have hydrogen, which is 1 multiplied by 2 because there are 2 atoms of hydrogen, plus oxygen, which is 16 multiplied by 1. Altogether, we have 18. So we can plug that into our formula to get the actual answer. Number of moles, remember, is equal to the mass of a substance divided by the molar mass of that substance. So let's plug in our values. Number of moles is 4. This is equal to the mass, which is not known, divided by the molar mass, which is 18. So when we cross multiply, the mass of the substance becomes 18 times 4. 18 multiplied by 4 gives us 72 grams. That is 72 grams of water produced. First section basics, second section intermediate, and third section exam standard fully blown away. I'm sure you got value for this video. It's been very, very, very interesting for me, and I trust it was for you too. Up next, we're going to be looking at solutions and concentration in the mole concept. It's something I look forward to breaking down explicitly for you, and I trust you enjoyed every bit of what was put out in today's video. With that being said, I'll see you in the next video. Do well to like, share, and subscribe. God bless you.